To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, go to gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. The musical Hamilton was a runaway Broadway success. It's a powerful immigrant story, and it explains the origin of the United States, which was full of personal drama. Alexander Hamilton had many beefs, like his one with Aaron Burr, which makes sense given that Burr, killed him in a duel. But it was Jefferson that Hamilton really hated. Jefferson and Hamilton openly disagreed about pretty much everything in the government, and their differences foreshadowed a lot of the conflicts we still see playing out in our two-party system today. Thanks a lot, guys. So that makes me wonder sometimes in the moments I grow weary of the infighting between Republicans and Democrats, if things really, really had to be this way. If someone else had also gotten in on the fights, maybe we could have had a third, fourth, fifth, 31st, even more political parties, like a lot of other countries. But it turns out there are several reasons why the US has only ever had two major parties, and one of them is the structure of our electoral system itself. Hi, I'm Dave Jorgensen, and this is Study Hall, Power in Politics and US Government. You'd never know it by the way the country looks today, but the US was never supposed to have political parties. The framers were very intentional about leaving it out of the Constitution, like how George Washington himself didn't belong to any political party. But then Hamilton and Jefferson became members of Washington's first presidential cabinet, and like any group of friends caught in the middle of a nasty breakup, the nation's leaders started to choose sides around the person they agreed with. So we ended up with two groups, and on Wednesdays they wore pink. Hamilton's crew became known as the Federalist Party, and Jefferson's people were the Democratic Republicans. This was a time with a lot of political tension that all kind of came to a head when Jefferson won the presidency in the year 1800. After that, and the death of Hamilton in 1804, the Federalist Party started to fall apart and eventually collapsed. So it was just Jefferson's Democratic-Republican Party still around. This period was aptly named the Era of Good Feelings, parentheses, Taylor's version, because after the War of 1812, people were feeling patriotic and there was less through-the-roof political tension. But in the 1824 presidential election, all four candidates were from the same party, and no one won the Electoral College, which meant that the House of Representatives had to pick the winner. They chose John Quincy Adams, even though Andrew Jackson had won the popular vote and the most votes in the Electoral College. The Electoral College requires the winner to have a majority of the votes, meaning one more vote than 50%. Jackson didn't cross that threshold, so he didn't win the election. And that caused the Democratic-Republican Party to split. Jackson's side became the Democratic Party, and in the 1830s, the anti-Jackson forces coalesced into the Whig Party. And for a while, those were the two major parties. But by the mid-1800s, slavery was a major political issue in the US. The Whig Party was declining, and some of its members joined with anti-slavery minor parties to form the new Republican Party. After the Civil War, through the New Deal era and into the 1960s civil rights movement, there were several big shifts called party realignment. These shifts happened to both the Democrats and the Republicans. The Southern Democrats meshed into the Republican Party, and the two underwent a massive ideological flip. And that's how we got to where we are in the 21st century. But there's a lot more than that singular historical beef between Hamilton and Jefferson behind how our elections keep us locked into a two-party system, where there are only two major political parties that compete at all levels of government. There have actually been 6 different eras where the parties reorganized themselves along ideological lines, and dominance was held by one party or another. Sometimes these shifts were gradual. Sometimes that change was sudden and made very clear by a single election. When that happens, it's called a critical election. But through all those changes and events, for the most part, there hasn't been a viable third party. Voters want their candidate to win. So even if other options are on the ballot, because third parties have never done well historically, they would rather give to vote to someone who can win. And that means voting for one of the two major parties because they have the resources and tools to run a successful campaign. Some third party candidates from the Green Party or the Libertarians have been somewhat successful, but they've never won the presidency. Probably the closest they've ever really come was in 1912, when Theodore Roosevelt led the short-lived Progressive Party to second place, or in the late 1900s when I was born. Ross Perot, an independent at the time, won 18.9% of the national vote. I was watching Barney. Ralph Nader from the Green Party won a whopping 2.7% of the national vote in 2000, causing many to believe he spoiled things for Al Gore and creating the phrase the Nader effect. And after all, Nader did win 100,000 votes in Florida, where Bush won by just 537 votes. So this idea that a third-party candidate can spoil things is just one reason why it's difficult for the US to have a viable third party. But a big additional reason for why we've only had two major parties at a time is because the US uses single ballot elections for single-member districts. That's where each voter casts one vote, and there's only one person who can get elected for each district per election. And these are winner-takes-all contests, meaning whoever gets the most votes wins. One way of tallying the votes is called plurality voting, or first past the post. The winner doesn't need to get 50% or more of the vote, they just need the highest number of votes. Winner-takes-all elections with plurality voting favor a two-party system, because people can feel like their vote will go to waste if they vote third party, like we talked about. That makes it hard for third parties to build the momentum to get the most votes, which is called Duverger's law. One other way to tally votes is to use a majoritarian system, where you can only win if you have at least 50% or the majority of the vote. A recent example of this was in Georgia during the 2022 elections. Democrat Raphael Warnock won about 37,000 more votes than Republican Herschel Walker, but because neither won more than 50% of the vote, a runoff election featuring only the top two candidates had to be held the following month, cutting third-place Libertarian Chase Oliver out of the race and forcing me to prepare for another late election night. But we ordered pizza, so it was fine. If you really want to have a system that's inclusive of third parties, there's always the multi-party system. It lets different political parties with platforms that span the entire political spectrum actually have a real chance of winning office. In the UK, for example, 10 different parties won seats in Parliament in 2019. A multi-party system offers the most options for voters to pick a party that best reflects their personal views. A lot of the time within multi-party systems, there's proportional representation, where parties get legislative seats based on the percentage of votes they win, so even small parties can get a representative in the legislature and the public as a whole is better represented. Let's use the US Senate as an example. There are 100 seats, 2 for each state. Say we hold a national election and everyone votes for the political party they want in the Senate. The Democratic Party wins 40% of the vote, the Republicans also win 40%, and the Green Party wins 20%. Under proportional representation, 40 seats would go to the Democrats, 40 to the Republicans, and 20 to the Green Party. Then usually the parties would decide which of their members actually sits in each seat. In reality, US senators represent the states and the people who live there. So it's not like we could pick 20 states and say their senators have to be Democrats, then tell another 20 that they'll be represented by Republicans. Advocates of proportional representation suggest that it could be possible to implement in the House if we expanded the number of representatives to keep up with the increasing US population, as was done before 1929 when it was capped. Because really, there isn't a solid reason why the US can't use proportional representation or institute some form of majoritarian voting. The way US elections are conducted evolved over time into what they are now. But officials currently in office probably don't have much of an incentive to want to change things because of their incumbency advantage in the current system. For example, incumbents in the House win re-election about 90% of the time, largely because of their name recognition. It brings them media attention and campaign contributions and lets them tap into existing campaign networks. But if someone really wants to change the procedure in their state, some states have citizen-initiated laws. That allows people to put proposed statutes or amendments directly on the ballot and bypass the state legislature. That usually involves getting a certain number of signatures from supporters. It's one way we can move away from a plurality winner-takes-all system. Alaska and Maine's shift to ranked choice voting were both implemented through voting initiatives. But one other very important reason that we stay in a two-party system is our campaign and election laws, which create state-imposed obstacles for third parties and independent candidates. Political parties are quasi-public, meaning they're private entities, but they work very closely with and are regulated by the state government. Local election laws set out requirements that candidates need to meet in order to even make it on a ballot, called ballot access laws. Ballot access laws are meant to prevent election fraud, overcrowding, and voter confusion. Reasonable ballot laws have been upheld by the Supreme Court. Some states require minor parties to get signatures on a petition to be on the ballot, and that amount varies state to state. In North Dakota, a new party would need 7,000 signatures, but in Arizona, they need more than 30,000 signatures. And any new party might need to earn a certain percentage of votes in the election to stay on the ballot the next time. Otherwise, they need to do the petition again in the next election. Ballot access laws, the historic lack of success by third parties, and the many structural, historic, and cultural reasons we talked about today do stop people who might be great candidates from running if they don't feel like they have a chance. Whether that's because someone else had some advantage early on, like national name recognition or early endorsements, or because they'd be running against the incumbent. A third-party candidate would have to come up with a great deal of funding, and if they lose, then they might not get more funding the next time, which kind of traps us in a cycle. The exact trap that the framers of the Constitution originally wanted to avoid, only then to create parties themselves, and not the fun kind. Here's the thing though, US voters are increasingly identifying as independent. In a 2022 Gallup poll, 28% identified as Democrats, 28% as Republicans, and 41% as independent, with an equal proportion leaning toward one side or the other. In fact, negative views of both parties are rising. In another 2022 survey, people were prompted with the statement, "I often wish there were more political parties to choose from in this country." 39% said that described their views either extremely or very well, and another 32% said it describes their view somewhat well. So over 70% of US voters said they want something other than what the current two-party system offers. A shift away from the current two political parties might lead toward realignment under a new party, like what happened with the Whigs, or maybe toward no parties at all and just end the beefing, just how George Washington wanted when he was wearing pink on Wednesday. If you're enjoying Study Hall Power and Politics in US Government and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credit, go to gostudyhall.com or click on the button to learn more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.